Hello, and thank you for joining us today in today's webinar. This is one of several mechanisms we're offering all applicants so that they have an opportunity to ask questions. Of course, we've offered one webinar already, completed yesterday. We will be posting that information online, and then we will also be posting today's information online as well as soon as it's available. And next week we'll have one more webinar. Of course, you can always submit a question through Shape California's Future at auditor.ca.gov, or you can call our toll-free number at 833-421-7550. My name is Margarita Fernandez. I'm the Chief of Public Affairs for the California State Auditor. With me today is Stephanie Ramirez-Ridgway, our Chief Counsel, and our Senior Staff Counsel, David King. First, thank you to all of you, all the applicants who have submitted an application and to becoming one of the 14-member commissioners for the 2020 Citizens Redistricting Commission. It's a very important job and one that will have an impact on every region in California and for every Californian as well for the next 10 years. So thank you for your interest in establishing fair district lines. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items, and I'm probably going to look at my notes because I don't want to forget anything. We have a very short presentation, so you can ask us questions after the presentation's over. We want to dedicate as much time to being able to get to some of your questions so that you can have your questions resolved and you can continue in the process and submit your application. So the majority of the time will be dedicated to questions and answers. To ask questions, you have to be participating on a computer or via the Zoom app on a mobile device or your tablet. So please ask your questions via this Q&A button that's located at the bottom of your screen. I will read the questions aloud so that everyone can hear the questions before they are answered. And we'll do our best to try to get through all the questions. But we may not be able to. And if we're not able to, you can always send us an email at shapecaliforniasfuture@auditor.ca.gov or call us on our toll-free number. And with that, I think we can get started. So today's agenda. As I said before, it'll be a short presentation, and we'll be covering just at a high level what the process is for becoming a commissioner, what you need to remember as an applicant, and a few questions. We'll be answering a few questions that we've had about how to complete the supplemental application. And then again, we will leave the majority of the time for questions. And again, as a reminder, use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. First, why continue? Why is this important? You've applied to be part of a 14-member team that will be redrawing the boundaries of our Congressional, State Senate, State Assembly, and the State Board of Equalization districts to reflect the new population data. The Voters First Act gave the power to citizens by creating a Citizens Redistricting Commission to ensure new and fair political boundaries are created fairly and transparently. A new commission is created every 10 years. So being a commissioner is an opportunity that only comes once every 10 years. So while the process may seem lengthy, because I'll go over that whole process in a few minutes, and complex, redistricting itself takes a lot of effort and it does require some diligence. So you've submitted that initial application to determine if you're tentatively qualified, and now the supplemental application does take more work and more effort. Why continue in the process? Again, it's a very important job, and it does ensure roughly the same number of people live in every congressional and state electoral district. So redistricting ensures every person equal representation, and it's how we abide by the principle, one person, one vote. So being on the commission gives you the opportunity to be at the table, to listen to the public, to consider different options, and to make decisions in creating those new and fair political boundaries. At a high level, what is the process for becoming a commissioner? Well, You have already submitted your initial application, the period ended August 19th, 2019. So right now we are in the phase that requires you to submit a supplemental application and 3 letters of recommendation. That period will end September 20th, 2019. So you must submit your supplemental application, and the 3 letters of recommendation must be received by our office by midnight, September 20th, 2019. The next part of this process will take our applicant review panel through the process of reviewing all the applications that come through and identifying 120 of the most qualified applicants. So 40 from each of the subpolls. There will be 40 Democrats, 40 Republicans, and 40 that belong to neither of those 2 parties. By law, we are required to have a commission made up of 14 members, and 5 will be Democrats, 5 will be Republicans, and 4 will belong to neither of those 2 parties. From February 2019 through April 2000, oh, I might have a typo in there, February 2020 through April 2020, thank you for correcting that, the applicant review panel conducts interviews for 120 applicants. So try to save that time frame. It might be you who's called in for an interview. In May 2020, the applicant review panel will identify 60 of the most qualified applicants. So 20 from each of the subpolls. After that point in time, the applicant review panel will be transmitting the list of the 60 applicants, the names of the list of the 60 applicants. And the legislature at this point will have an opportunity to strike some of the names from the list. By law, the 4 legislative leaders have an opportunity to strike up to 2 names, each of them, in each of the subpolls. So in total, it would be 24 strikes. After they have completed that process, the list of names that are still in the applicant pool will come back to the state auditor, and by July 5th, 2020, the state auditor will randomly select the first 8 commissioners. The law requires us to randomly select the first 3 Republicans, the first 3 Democrats, and the first 2 that belong to neither of those 2 parties. Those first 8 commissioners will then select the remaining 6 commissioners, so that they'll have a total of 14 commissioners, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and 4 that belong to neither of those 2 parties. And that has to be done by August 15th, 2020. All this information is also available on our website in case you want to catch those dates again. But what you need to remember at this point is, of course, to submit your online supplemental application by midnight, September 20th, 2019. And ensure that your 3 letters of recommendation are also submitted by that time. You should also remember that potential interviews will be held late winter, early spring. And as a reminder, all our applications will be posted to the website, but only while the applicant is in the active applicant pool. So if you are removed from the applicant pool, we will remove your application from the website as well. The commission, again, must be established by August 15th, 2020. A few other reminders about the supplemental application is that each application is assigned a unique ID number. Also, remember to save the application, and you can do that at any time. But saving the application does not mean it's submitted. So once you're ready to go, you like your application, and you feel it's in good shape, then you want to make sure you submit the application. You will be notified when we receive the application. While you're completing the application, there are some links to the regulations throughout the application. For example, when you get to some of the essay questions, there are some handy links that will take you to the regulations as a reminder of information that we're looking for. These essay questions, there are 5 essay questions. 3 of them are about the 3 qualifications that are required by law as well. The ability to be impartial, your analytical skills, and your appreciation for California's diverse demographics and geography. The 2 additional essay questions are also on there at various parts of the application, and they are really there to give us an idea of why you want to be on the commission, and if you have any additional information that you haven't been able to provide elsewhere. Again, the essay questions will help us look at your application to determine if you're able to evaluate information with an open mind to make decisions, that you recognize benefits of California's diversity, both geographic and demographic as well, that you can gather and comprehend data and information, and of course that you can work effectively in a group. You will be working with 14 members and you will be meeting with the public. When you're completing this, you'll want to make sure that you draw upon some of your experiences, and they don't have to be just professional. They could be personal or volunteer work as well. So, but we are looking to see what types of experiences you have and what you can offer. So now that we've covered the basics, we'd like to open the floor to questions. If you have a question, please type it in and submit it using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Again, if you're not on a computer or using the Zoom app on a mobile phone or tablet to ask questions, you can later email us at shapecaliforniasfuture@auditor.ca.gov or call us on our toll-free number 833-421-7550, and one of our staff members will respond. Our attorneys, Stephanie and David, are here at the webinar to help you. So here we go. So the first question, the website shows how many completed applications you have received. Does that mean both the supplemental application as well as all 3 letters of recommendation?
I don't think that we're showing yet our list of completed supplemental applications and letters of recommendation. Under the law, we're required to gather that information during this phase and put it all up at the end of the supplemental period. So I don't believe that information is publicly available. I can tell you we are getting supplemental applications turned into us as well as letters of recommendation.
So the statistics page does show the number of applications that we received, but they are not visible yet. If they have been completed, which would mean that they have the letters of recommendation, but only the number and not the application itself.
Oh, I think I misunderstood the question. I'm really sorry about that. Right, we don't have supplemental materials up yet, and that's because, you know, in all honesty, we want to make sure that people are doing their best on their own and taking the full time that they need to put up their responses and gather their letters. It's not a race. The most important thing is you get done on time and get it turned in. And then again, once we go through our process, sort of behind the scenes, making sure that all the letters of recommendation are there and the applications are complete, that's when we'll put that information up. So it'll be viewable to you at that point.
Can you give some examples of information analysis that members will be reviewing? What kind of data will be involved?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. Can you give some examples of information analysis that members will be reviewing? What kind of data will be involved? Perhaps they're talking about the applications that are coming in.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You could be meaning 2 things, so we'll try to address both of them. When the applicant review panel, that is the group of 3 individuals here at the state auditor's office who will make determinations about the applicants who remain in the pool and make their way to the interview process. 120 of those individuals will be interviewed, and then that number will be cut in half down to 60 with 3 pools of 20, 20, and 20. The applicant review panel will look at all the applications, the essays, public comments, letters of recommendation. We'll be doing some background work to make sure and verify that the information that's been provided to the ARP is true and correct. They'll receive those background checks or the background write-ups, and And that's what the ARP will do. When you said members, it also made me think maybe you're talking about the legislature, because as Margarita indicated at the opening during the PowerPoint presentation, the legislature does have the opportunity to make some strikes. We send over a list of 60 people, 20 Dems, 20 Reaps, and 20 others. And legislative leaders have the opportunity to make up to 2 strikes each. So 4 times 2 is 8, 8 strikes to each pool, and we get back a list of up to 36 individuals.
It's also possible that the question was referring to the commission members.
Maybe so. And they don't really have a role in the selection process. But if we're talking about the data that they will ultimately receive and analyze, you're right. And that's census data, public comments, both written and verbally. There are other aspects of data that they may choose to consider. There's certain prisoner data that will be included in the pool. They may consider, just the geographic realities of the state of California in terms of mountain ranges and city and county boundaries. It's a lot of data for them. And that is really the key to the relevant analytical skills, is making sure that you're the kind of person who can sort of digest all that information coming in large volumes from different places and make some decisions based on your analysis of that information.
Okay. How did the 2010 commission structure itself? Did it have a chairperson and other officers? Did it use subcommittees?
Well, I believe that they used a rotating chair, so that for every meeting they held, they would take turns being chair and vice chair. And that was because they really wanted it to be fair and nonpartisan. They wanted everyone to have an opportunity to serve as the chair. They also worked as a group of 14. So they did not make use of subcommittees. They generally operated all together in public meetings and other decision-making points and public events. This next commission, it has the ability to decide how it wants to do its work, and you will have some flexibility within the confines of your 14-member panel in terms of deciding how you'd like to approach the work.
And also, I would add that the commission is also entitled to hire their own support staff, hire their separate legal counsel, and also hire consultants and experts to the extent that they need training on certain aspects, especially the Voting Rights Act. They have the authority to gather what resources they need to perform the job that they're required to do.
And they could choose to form subcommittees.
Oh, absolutely. They absolutely can do that. They'll have lots of flexibility in terms of the way that they comport themselves, as long as they're complying with open meetings laws and the Voters First Act.
Okay. So will we receive a notification as each of our letters of recommendation arrive, or will we only be notified when all 3 are received?
You should be notified as they come in. So when we receive your first one, you should receive an email that indicates that we've received one, and for example, it's from Stephanie Ramirez Ridgway. You'll get that information via an email. So be sure to make sure that we're added to your address book and that you're not receiving that information straight into your junk or your spam file, because you might miss a lot of communications that way.
Okay. One of the last steps in the review process is to send a list of qualified candidates to the legislature where names can be removed or vetoed. What are the rules concerning these vetoes? Will candidates who are removed at this point be told why they were rejected?
There really aren't any rules that govern necessarily how the legislature does this work, and that's something that is wholly independent from the state auditor's office. We don't have any control over how they do their strikes. It's my understanding that last time they made their strikes and that they did not communicate to individual candidates as to why they were or were not included in the list of folks that came back to us. I don't know whether you could speak to individual members about that, but we were not privy to that information.
The letters of recommendation, are they to be sent to the applicant, or if not, how are they submitted?
We actually prefer that they get submitted electronically directly to our office. We've provided each applicant with an email that contains information, including a link that they should share with their letter writer, so that For example, if you're choosing 3 letter writers, you give one link to your first one link to your second one, and one link to your third one, and they submit those directly to our office electronically. If they can't do it electronically, they can also do it via fax, via mail, via email, but we would prefer that those letters come directly to us.
Okay. Will you notify applicants in December 2019 and or January 2020 that they have been selected for an interview beginning in February?
I don't know precisely when we'll be making that notification. Some of that depends on the total number of applications, completed supplemental applications that we receive, and how long it takes the ARP to do its first and second review of those applications. I suggest or suspect that we'll probably be notifying folks more like late January. And the way that the process will work is that we'll notify all applicants who have been selected to participate in interviews at the same time. You'll get an email communication that also contains information as to how you sign up for those interviews. And we intend to designate some slots during a several-week period, running from roughly mid-February through roughly mid-April, mid to early April. And applicants will have the opportunity to sign up on a first-come, first-served basis. So you should have some flexibility, especially if you get on there the first day, to choose a time that works well for you and your schedule.
How long should the letters of recommendation be? Should they be focused more on what we do for work or outside of work, volunteer, neighborhood association, etc.? How competitive is this commission?
When you received your email inviting you to submit the supplemental application along with the letters of recommendation, it should have contained a link that takes you to a document that provides guidance on writing letters of recommendation. So I would, first of all, invite you to look at that document. But essentially, the letters of recommendation, we try to limit to 3 pages. And then as for content, what we really look for is information that sheds light on what kind of person the applicant is and how well that applicant might serve on this commission. What we really value is concrete examples of ways in which the applicant, for example, has analytical skills or appreciates California's diversity or can be impartial. So we invite you to really think about who you want to ask to submit a letter of recommendation on your behalf. And then once you've selected that person, really think about or ask that person to think about why you would be qualified to serve on this commission.
I understand applicants must have had the same party registration for the past 5 years. I have never been registered as either a Democrat or a Republican, and I was registered as a Green Party member for several years. However, in 2016, I changed my registration to no party preference, nonpartisan, or decline to state. Does this change disqualify me as an applicant? It seems to me that I would still meet the intent of having someone who is genuinely a third party, no party voter, even though I technically switched. In other words, is it okay if I have been in the same subpool since 2015?
Unfortunately, it is not okay to have changed your voter registration at any point in time during the 5 years preceding the application period. And that's written into the law. That's not something that the state auditor's office has control over. It's part of the rules that were approved by the voters when they approved the Voters First Act and the Voters First Act for Congress. So we don't have the authority to deviate. And we just encourage you to not let that discourage you from participating in redistricting, because even though you may not be eligible to serve on this commission, the commission is really depending on people like you who are interested and passionate and have a third party perspective. They want to hear about you. They want to hear from you about communities of interest and where you think those lines should be drawn. And that's some of the most value that you can add as a non-commissioner through the redistricting process is participating, assisting them, and getting your friends and family to do the same.
Okay. How much traveling will be required, and who pays for the staff or consultants?
So the commission will have a budget. They have already received some funds to be allocated for this process over the next 3 years. And as a state entity, they'll have the opportunity to submit additional budget proposals over the course of their 10-year period. Those funds can be used to pay for, will be used to pay for the contracted vendors who may assist in the process, particular experts, staff, etc. In terms of travel, this is something that really ends up being largely in the commission's control. If you're selected to be on the commission, you and your 13 other fellow commissioners will need to decide how it is you want to do this and how much travel you want to do. Maybe the commission this time will decide to operate in subcommittees so that not the entire group travels across the state. Maybe they'll decide to engage the public, as we're doing right now, via webinars and other technical advances that have cropped up in the last 10 years. So there is an ability to sort of create your own destiny once you're chosen on the commission and make decisions about how the commission itself will do its work. And in addition, and I'm not really clear based on your question, but I want to make sure I'm answering just in case you're asking this. The commissioners do receive a per diem stipend for serving on the commission. We think that amount is going to be about $375 per day. We can't really do the calculation until December of this year. And they're also entitled to reimbursement for reasonable expenses associated with their work. So, you know, if you go and stay at a motel as part of your commission work, the commission should reimburse you for the cost of that.
I read about the time requirements, but are there certain periods of the year that are more demanding of our time?
I think there is 1 year that's going to be super demanding. We have to have the 14 commissioners selected and in place by August 15th of 2020. And the 14 new commissioners will really need to hit the ground running. We'll start off with some significant training and getting them established in their offices. And then even though the census data won't come out until much later, there's still a lot of work that can be done in terms of traveling the state. So I suspect that the hardest, busiest year is going to be 8/15/20 through 8/15/2021 when the final maps are due.
I would add too that for this question and for a lot of other questions we've been receiving about what the commissioner's duties are and what the first term did, we held a series of trainings for the applicant review panel in the last several weeks. And part of that training involved having several of the commission members from the 2010 term come and speak to their experience redrawing maps, traveling around the state, talking to various people, and they went into a deep dive and provided a lot of great detail about what that experience was like. Those training sessions are available on our website, so we certainly invite you to watch those to get a better sense of what the commission did.
Yeah, that's a good point. They gave us a lot of really interesting insight about the experience that they had, and despite all the hard work, every one of them said it was something that they consider really a highlight of their lives. So, you know, with some hard work comes great glory.
If one is from a specific diversity demographic with interest in that demographic, is that a disqualifier regarding the issue of impartiality?
I don't think so. We all have our interests, our passions, a connection to certain groups or certain ideological principles. The issue really is the ability to set aside your own interests and desires and really make decisions that are well-informed, based on concrete information, and truly fair to the individuals whose districts you'll be drawing. So we don't consider having strong views to be a problem. It's just if you can't set those strong views aside and do what's right for the people whose lives you're impacting, that creates a problem. And as long as you can set aside your personal biases and be impartial, you're fine.
Okay. Will assigned interview dates be flexible? What if I'm not available on the day I am assigned an interview? And will interviews first be conducted via digital services such as Zoom or in Sacramento?
So the interviews will definitely be here in Sacramento. The ARP needs the opportunity to meet you face to face and engage with you. And as I indicated a little bit earlier, you might not have been on yet. We're intending to send all applicants at the same time a list of available interview slots. And that should be several days each week for a period of 6 to 8 weeks. As long as you're one of the first people to respond to that email, you'll get to sign up for the slot and on the date and time that works best for you. So we just encourage you to make sure that you're really responsive if you make it that far and you get that email from us.
Who is on the applicant review panel, and are submitted applications public documents?
So our applicant review panel is comprised of Ben Belknap, Angela Dickinson, and Ryan Coe. There's 3 auditors here in our office who have a minimum of 10 years experience in independent auditing. They're great folks. If you go to our website and you check on the little tab on top that says ARP page or applicant review panel, you'll pull up a tab that has a great deal of information about each of the current applicant review panel members as well as the alternates. And I think we even have pictures there of them so you can read a little biography. Your applicant materials, anything that you submit or that is submitted on your behalf, those are public records. Certainly we're not intending to ever share your phone number or your home address or your email address, other confidential information. But under the law, the documents that you submit on behalf of your application and that are submitted by others on your behalf are in fact public records. They'll be posted on our website, and members of the public will have the ability to comment on those materials and tell us whether they agree that you're a great applicant or they have concerns.
Do the people who write the letters of recommendation have to be Californians?
No, not at all. What they have to be are people who know you and can speak to your talents, your experiences, and what kind of person you are to give insight to the applicant review panel so that they can make decisions that are best for the commission in the state of California.
Does being retired have a positive or negative implication for approval?
Congratulations. Doesn't matter. If you've got the time and the ability, whether you've ever worked before or you used to work or you're not working now, doesn't make any difference to us. This isn't about your current or past professional life. It's about who you are and whether or not you have the ability to make good and fair decisions using all this data.
Okay. Do I have to leave my current job?
No.
In fact, there's a provision in the Voters First Act that makes it clear that it's unlawful for your employer to discriminate against you or take adverse action against you for participating in commission meetings and events. We had, I think, 11 of the last 14 commissioners all had jobs, many of which were more than full-time jobs, including individual business owners, and they still managed to keep their businesses and keep their jobs and do the work of the commission.
So will the applicant review panel use a rubric to evaluate the supplemental applications? So a specific score weighting for the questions, letters, or recommendation, or is it more of a qualitative evaluation?
There's no scoring, there's no grading, there's no secret formula to determining who makes it through the process. It really is about evaluating the whole of the applicant based on the materials that are submitted to the panel and making decisions based on, first, are they qualified? Do you have the ability to be impartial? Do they have the relevant analytical skills? Do they have an appreciation for California's diversity and geography? And then it comes down to, do you seem like a person who's good and fair and can work well with others and is excited and enthusiastic about taking on a big job?
How long should the essay be?
Well, there is a character count on the essays.
3,200.
And I think it's 3,200, so it's not a lengthy amount. You'll want to choose your words carefully and try to avoid being too verbose or you'll run out of space. The nice thing is, as Margarita indicated during the PowerPoint, you do have the ability to save your application incrementally. So if you go in and you find, gosh, I've got too many words and I need to make some cuts, you can save it, come back to it, work in Word, and transfer your essays over. So there is a limitation, but we have not heard from anyone that the limitation is too confining. We tried to be as generous as we could.
I ran for public office last year. Do I need to report my own contributions to my campaign in the question asking for contributions to various social groups and causes?
There's several layers to that question.
Yeah.
I think, well, I'll address one layer that I think the question is addressing, which is whether the applicant is disqualified for running for office or being a candidate for office. The conflict of interest rules do disqualify someone who's been a candidate within the last 10 years for federal or state elective office. It wasn't clear from the question whether the candidate was for local office or federal or state, but that's one thing to consider.
And local office is okay.
Local office is okay. As for reporting the contributions, there is a $2,500 per year contribution threshold. If you do contribute more than $2,500 per year in any year the last 10 years to a candidate for elective office, federal, state, or local office, I would add, that is disqualifying unless, and this is a weird nuance to the regulations, unless the contribution was to your own campaign. For questions like that, though, I would say for these more complicated questions, please send an email describing your particular question, and someone, probably me, will get back to you with a response.
Yeah, it gives us a chance to sort of dialogue back and forth with you a little bit to dig into the details. If you're a local candidate for a local office and you've contributed $2,500 or more, that's not disqualifying if it's to your own campaign. Beyond that, we probably need to hear from you to get a few more details.
Okay. Please describe the support system provided to commissioners.
Well, there are multiple layers to that as well. Under the law, the state auditor's office has a responsibility to help the commission until it is fully functional on its own. And so the state auditor's office will get at least temporary staff involved to support the commission. We expect you're going to need an executive director, you're probably going to need a PR person, you probably need some office techs, definitely legal counsel. We're going to do our part to get you at least some temporary folks to do that work, and then we'll also look for more permanent folks so that you've got a roster of individuals to interview when you get started. So that's the first layer where our office is involved. Remember that the commission is in fact a state body. It has the authority to hire its own staff. And so that will be really up to the commission and how it chooses to spend its budget allocation for support staff. But we expect that there will be sufficient funds so that you can have good legal counsel, good map drawing experts, redistricting experts, at least a sufficient number of support staff. And then the commission will decide how else it wants to sort of flesh out that support team.
Okay. After the commission is selected, on average, how long does it take to do the redistricting?
Well, that is a trick question. And I say that because it could probably take a really long time, but the commission only has about a year. I believe that the initial maps have to be put forth on July 5th of 2021. Is that right? I'm having trouble with my ears. And so if the commission is selected by the deadline of 8/15/2020, that gives you just under a year to get your initial maps posted. And then they have to be put out for public comment, and they have to be finalized by 8/15/2021. So you've got about a year to do the job. Whether that is enough, I think is probably an open question. Some of the commissioners felt like, they could have used more time. But they also, in the trainings that David was talking about, that we have posted on our website, they all said that it was a wonderful experience and they were able to get the job done within the time frame. And this time they actually have more time than they had last time. So who knows?
I think it's important to note too with the thrust of these questions is I think applicants are showing some apprehension about the about the duties and whether they can perform them. For example, they have full-time jobs. And like you said, it is a hard job. It's going to be a hard job, but it's also very rewarding. But what I also want to emphasize is once commission is formed, they're not just going to be pushed off into the water and left to fend for themselves. They are entitled to hire staff, legal counsel, and experts to help educate them on the legal requirements and help educate them on what processes they need to undergo to get this commission functional.
Right, and our office is going to provide at least some of that training. So no one should feel intimidated. You won't be alone.
In the questions that asks about financial contributions to professional, social, political, volunteer, and community organization, does this include contributions to religious organizations?
Yes, it does. The reason for that is really simple. Where you spend your money is often, where your heart leads you, and we want to know. We want to know where our applicants are, what kind of people they are, what is important to them, and so yes, religious contributions absolutely would be included in that.
Okay. I understand that applicants do not need professional experience in, for instance, California geography, but are you especially looking for non-professionals? Are non-professionals generally more attractive than professionals?
I don't think so. I don't think that, I was counsel to the ARP last time that we did this, and I don't remember a person's professional background as ever being necessarily a deciding factor. It was more the essays and the interviews and the public comments and the 2010 ARP's sense of, is this the kind of person that can do a hard job with 13 strangers and get it done on time? And we didn't really pay attention to what folks did for a living. It was more about who they are and whether they had the stuff to get the job done.
I just found out that my daughter and son-in-law gave more than $2,500 to a presidential campaign in 2019. They also gave the presidential campaign for a senatorial run in 2016, probably more than $2,500. But maybe a bit less. Does this disqualify me?
Well, I think the threshold question is whether or not you have a bona fide relationship with them. And that's something that you can email us and we can help you walk through. Remember that your family members' decisions and how they spend their money and what they do for a living really only matters if you're in a relationship that's considered a bona fide under our regulations. And that essentially means that you either lived with that family member for cumulatively more than 30 days in a calendar year, or you have shared ownership in property worth more than $1,000 with that individual, or you've provided some sort of financial benefit or received some sort of financial benefit from them in the amount of over $1,000 during the past 12 months. So that's really a threshold issue for you. And then I think we probably also want to have a little more information about the specific donations, which you don't have to tell us here. Email us or give us a call. But it depends on where the candidates were from. Were they running in California? Is it a presidential election versus a statewide election? And those are all questions that we want to dig into. You made it real clear on one of the donations that you described, but I'm not 100% sure what kind of donation or campaign was involved in that second donation that you mentioned.
Yeah, feel free to submit a question in writing to us and add as much detail as you can, and that will help you decide how this application goes forward.
The link to describe the activities essay doesn't give nearly as much guidance as the links for the other essays. Can you give additional guidance as to what the panel is looking for there?
Well, I don't know that I know what the panel's looking for. I think the panel knows that at this point, and they haven't started looking at applications yet. So it may be difficult even for them to articulate that in a vacuum. Again, I think what we're looking for generally is trying to find out what kind of a person you are. Are you engaged in your community? Do your activities reflect desire to help people? Are you sufficiently familiar, based on maybe your activities, with California and the people who live here? We're just really looking for an extra opportunity to hear about you, the things that are important to you, your passions, and what kind of person you are.
For the letters of recommendation, can you give more of an idea of what types of people one should ask for a letter of recommendation?
I think the bottom line is someone who knows you well enough
Yeah.
and can communicate your qualifications to serve on this commission. It doesn't have to be someone with great credentials or someone who's a close family member, or even someone who comes from a partisan political background. It just needs to be someone who can best describe you, describe the kind of person you are, who can provide concrete examples of your qualifications. And I think all of that will be the most compelling for the panel when they review your application.
Can you please explain more about the public comment process?
Sure. Once the application materials are posted on our website, the public has an opportunity to make public comment on those materials and on the applicants. So the way that it works is public comment comes into our email, and we review it, and we make sure that it doesn't contain anything offensive, and then we'll send it to you and say, here's a public comment that we received about you. You'll have, I believe, 5 days to respond to us and either tell us, gee, that's not true, or that's not quite right, it wasn't 1980, it was 1985. But you'll have an opportunity to comment, make corrections, or provide some sort of feedback if you choose to do so. And once those 5 days have expired, at that point, whether we've heard from you or not, the public comments will go up on the website, and they'll be available for the public to see. I don't think that should be scary, though. I mean, I know that sounds a little scary, but last time we really found that the public comments were largely genuine and helpful, and people just trying to help the applicant review panel make good decisions. I don't have a specific recollection of folks bad-mouthing other people or saying anything, awful. It was just they were speaking from their hearts about what they thought about a particular applicant, and it's a transparent process. We want all of you to be able to do that.
Okay. So I still didn't understand how many applications were received initially, not counting supplemental applications that may or may not have been returned.
So I think we got about 21,000 applications, and of those, and there's some change there, it's 21,000 and some change. Of those, roughly 17,000 and some change were deemed tentatively eligible and have now been invited to submit their supplemental applications. I hope that answers your question. If not, and if you run out of time, either join us on our next webinar or send us an email or give us a call, and we can try to be more helpful.
One of the slides presented on the last day of the review panel training last week showed the diversity representation of the current commission. Will the current review panel look for a similar diversity profile spread when deciding the 100 to 60 candidate pool?
No. In fact, the slide that was put up was actually by one of our current commissioners from the 2010 commission, and he was talking largely about how to deal with diversity, and he was pointing out, throughout the process, in the end, this is what we ended up with. But the ARP is not allowed to use any kind of formula or quota. We're not interested in specific numbers or specific types of people for specific positions, be it on the commission or otherwise. We just want to make sure, as the law requires, that we have a commission that is not comprised of 14 women from Los Angeles. That wouldn't be diverse. We want to make sure that we've got a well-rounded group of individuals who can represent the many different perspectives that exist out there and bring different viewpoints and be accessible to the public. But there's no formulas or quotas.
Are commissioners indemnified by the state?
Depends what they do. That is a very legal answer from a lawyer. Generally speaking, if we're talking about the work that they do as a commissioner, drawing the maps and making decisions about public records, yes, the state indemnifies that. Certainly, if we had a commissioner who engaged in really inappropriate personal behavior, as a supervisor, as a state official under the law, if there was a harassment incident or something, which we hope to avoid, if that happened, then there could be personal liability, but that would be based on the commissioner's personal actions that are outside the scope of employment.
Okay. How long will the commission be active? I believe their term is 10 years, but how long will the commission meet regularly to redraw district lines?
So that, again, is going to depend largely on the commission itself. I think without a doubt, it's going to be very, very busy from 8/15/20 to 8/15/21. And then after those maps are finalized and put forward on 8/15/21, there'll probably be some wrap-up work. There could be some litigation that needs to be defended. But generally speaking, the work dropped off significantly after the maps were submitted to the public, and then the commission really decided how it was going to continue to do its work. They chose to continue to meet periodically. They also did a lot of continued travel and public engagement about redistricting and about different redistricting approaches, such as a citizens approach like this, not only in California, but throughout the United States. And so, again, that will be something that the commission will decide.
Are state attorneys present at public meetings to assist the commissioners?
They absolutely should be, unless the commission tells them not to, which I would advise is a very bad idea.
How are lawsuits against the commission handled? Are the commissioners represented by the state of California Attorney General's office and compensated by the state for testimony and court appearances?
I don't think there's going to be compensation for testimony in court appearances unless a commissioner is acting in the capacity as an expert in a particular matter. Generally, if you are part of an organization that is sued, you participate in the litigation, but you're not paid to do so. You might get your per diem because that would be state work, but you wouldn't necessarily get an hourly expert witness fee. The first part of that question again, Margarita?
How are lawsuits against the commission handled?
So the commission does have some flexibility in terms of who it wants to hire to defend itself. I believe that the last commission used both the Attorney General's office as well as private outside counsel to defend the litigation relating to the maps it put forward. Those maps were upheld. But I don't know that the commission is necessarily bound to use the Attorney General's office if for some reason there's a conflict or a level of expertise that doesn't exist there.
Okay. I volunteer my services for many activities in my community, including serving as a member of the commission in my city, appointed by our city council. How do I value these non-monetary contributions?
That's a good question.
That might be a good one for you to write in and talk to us. We'll probably want to know a little bit more about exactly what it is you're doing and exactly what groups you're working for. For example, there are a number of individuals in our office who are accountants, and very often they end up volunteering their time to assist their churches or their preschools or other nonprofits to do their books for them. In that instance, we would try to ascribe a monetary value to those services, and we would do our best to we'd ask the applicant to do his or her best to estimate what the fair market value is of those services. That's what we would want you to do for your application, and if you need help with that, by all means give us a call at 833-421-7550 or send us an email, and we'll absolutely get back to you.
I would say too that I appreciate the question because the services that you provide to the volunteer organizations or your local communities really reflects what kind of person you are. So to the extent that you are going to be reporting these contributions, that really helps us and it helps the panel decide what kind of person you are and whether you would be a good fit to serve on a commission.
Can you explain how an application should be revised if, for example, the bona fide or special relationship status of an immediate family member changes after September 20th, 2019?
So there is an ability to make amendments to your application as you go through the process. And this was something that even came up last time. You know, people get married, they move, they change jobs. And so there's a mechanism within the system for you to submit a request to make an amendment. And then we'll sort of walk you through that process. If you need to make an amendment, don't hesitate to call that 1-800 number or 833 number or send us an email to let us know what's happening.
Okay. I make small monthly contributions to an organization that I will be reporting because the total exceeds $250 for a 1-year period. May I lump all these contributions together, noting various dates, or do I need to report each month's contributions separately?
That's a good question. I would say that it could become pretty repetitive to submit each moment or each day that you submit a contribution. So it's fine to lump it all together and noting each date, so long as however you do it, our panel understands that this is the amount and this is the way that those amounts were contributed.
Right. So for example, if you give to the SPCA and it's $30 a month, so that's a total of $360 over the course of a year, it would be perfectly fine to say, you know, Sacramento County SPCA, $360. Of course, if you do something similar for other entities like PBS or your church, you're also going to want to separately include the cumulative amount for those contributions as well.
Okay. We still have time for maybe one more question.
Okay.
Roughly how many initial and supplemental applications were received in the last cycle?
Oh boy, making me do math. I believe last time we got about 30,000 initial applications, and then for supplementals we got just about 5,000, and I may be somewhat off, but I'm really close for the supplemental applications last time.
Okay. We still have time actually to have one more question. Where physically will the commission be housed, and is it always in Sacramento or does it rotate around the state?
That largely depends on the space that the governor's office provides for the commission. Under the law, responsibilities to assist the commission are sort of divided between our office and between the governor's office and a few other entities. One of the responsibilities that the governor's office has is to allocate space for the commission. I assume that at least for the first year, that space will be here. Whether or not the commission has the ability to confer with governors and staff to make a request to locate somewhere else, depending upon whether that makes sense for the commission, is totally an option if that's what the commission decides it wants to do.
Okay. Well, thank you for everyone who's participated in today's webinar. If you did have your question answered right now, you don't have to wait for another webinar. You can submit your question through Shape California's Future at auditor.ca.gov. You can also call us at 1-833-421-7550. Again, feel free to use any of these other options to get your questions resolved so that you can complete your application by September 20th, 2019 by midnight. And make sure you get your letters of recommendation are also submitted by that time. There's also a 15-minute video at the bottom of the homepage which walks step by step through the supplemental application and gives you a good understanding of what's required at each section. And don't forget the other webinar that will be held next week on September 12th at 6 p.m. You can feel free to join us. Thank you again for participating today and for your interest in being part of the 2020 Citizens Redistricting Commission to shape California's future.
Thank you.
Thank you.